The medieval diet is one of the most misunderstood aspects of history. Popular culture paints it as a time of constant feasting, overflowing goblets, and roasted meats on every table. But these images are often misleading. The truth is far more intricate. What people ate in medieval Europe depended on many factors: class, region, religion, the agricultural calendar, trade, and even politics. In this video, we'll examine the medieval diet in depth. What people truly ate, how they prepared and preserved their food, how it varied between the nobility and commoners, and how diet reflected larger social structures. Every statement in this video is grounded in historical evidence, drawn from period cookbooks, archaeology, monastic records, and scholarly research. There is no speculation here, only what the records show us. Let's begin. For most people living in medieval Europe, food was not a source of pleasure. It was fuel. Something to keep the body moving through long hours of labor. Bread, pottage, ale. These three staples dominated the diets of commoners. Bread was the foundation. Depending on the region and availability, bread was made from barley, rye, oats, or, if one had access, wheat. Coarse, dark loaves were the norm for peasants. Finer white wheat bread was a luxury item, almost exclusively reserved for the elite. A single person might eat up to 3 pounds of bread a day. That's not an exaggeration. Alongside bread was ale. It was weak in alcohol but rich in calories. Small beer, or small ale as it was sometimes called, was consumed daily, often more than a gallon per person. It was safer than untreated water, and it helped wash down dry loaves of bread. Pottage, a thick stew of grains, legumes, and vegetables, was served as a main dish. Its contents varied with the seasons: cabbage in the cooler months, leeks and herbs in spring, root vegetables when available. Meat was rare in peasant pottage. More often it included beans, peas, or lentils. These three foods, bread, pottage, and ale, formed a complete meal for most medieval people. And they ate them every day, in every season, across every decade. Vegetables were a major component of the medieval diet, but they were not eaten raw. Cultural and medical beliefs of the time held that raw foods carried illness. As a result, vegetables were boiled, baked, or stewed. Common vegetables included onions, leeks, garlic, cabbage, parsnips, turnips, carrots, and spinach. These were grown in home gardens or gathered from the wild. Peasants depended heavily on them, especially in stews. Even wealthier households used them in side dishes and soups. Fruits were consumed fresh when in season and dried or preserved for later. Apples and pears were common. Plums, cherries, and berries appeared in jams, wines, and sauces. Dried fruits like raisins and figs were imported and expensive. For the nobility, sweet sauces made of dried fruit and wine added flavor to meat dishes. Legumes, peas, beans, chickpeas, and lentils were a critical source of protein for the working class. Easy to grow and store, they were used in soups, bread, or simply boiled and seasoned. In the 10th and 11th centuries, the widespread cultivation of legumes helped boost the nutrition of European peasants and played a role in population growth. Dairy was widely consumed, though again, access varied by class. Milk from cows, goats, or sheep was used fresh, but more often transformed into butter, cheese, and buttermilk, products that lasted longer and could be traded or stored. Butter was a key fat for cooking, especially in Northern Europe. In some religious orders, its use was limited by church rules, leading to regional variations in fat consumption. Cheese was made in many forms. Soft cheeses were eaten fresh, hard cheeses were aged and used as provisions. Monasteries often produced cheese on a large scale, both for sustenance and sale. In religious fasts, when animal products were restricted, almond milk became a staple, especially among the wealthy. Made by soaking and grinding almonds, then straining the liquid, almond milk was used in sauces, stews, and even fake butter and cheese. It had a long shelf life and became a prominent ingredient in medieval cookery. Meat was prized, but not frequently eaten by peasants. Pork was the most accessible meat. Pigs could be raised on scraps and left to forage. Salted pork and bacon were common in rural homes. Beef and lamb required more resources, and were less common outside noble households. When eaten, they were often preserved, salted or smoked, rather than served fresh. Poultry, especially chickens and ducks, were more common in peasant homes. Eggs provided protein and could be gathered regularly. Geese and capons were kept for feasts or special occasions. The nobility enjoyed game meats: deer, boar, rabbit, partridge, pheasant, and swan. These were acquired through hunting, a right restricted to the upper class. Their kitchens also served elaborate dishes made of liver, kidneys, and tripe. Fish played an enormous role, especially during fast days. Saltwater fish like cod and herring were salted or dried and transported inland. Freshwater fish like trout and pike were kept in controlled ponds by monasteries and estates. Shellfish were consumed in coastal regions. Some religious loopholes allowed beavers and barnacle geese to be eaten on fast days, since they lived in or around water. The use of spices was a clear indicator of wealth. Black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, saffron, and cloves were imported through long-distance trade routes and were extremely expensive. These spices were not used to mask spoiled meat, as is often claimed. Rather, they enhanced flavors and conveyed status. Noble kitchens included spice blends in sauces, wines, and roasts. Salt was essential for preservation and flavor. In inland regions, it was often expensive. Salt works and mines were heavily controlled and taxed. Sweets were rare for commoners. The primary sweetener was honey, often harvested from local hives. Sugar, when it appeared, was an imported luxury. Desserts in noble households included fruit tarts, fritters, and marzipan. Subtleties were elaborate sugar sculptures often served between courses to impress guests. Without refrigeration, food preservation was critical. Several methods were used. Drying, grains, beans, herbs, fruits, and some meats were dried to prevent spoilage. Salting and curing, salted meat and fish could last through the winter. Smoking, meats were smoked to add both flavor and shelf life. Pickling, vegetables were preserved in brine or vinegar. Fermenting, ale, wine, cheese, and bread all relied on fermentation. Honeying, fruits and nuts were sometimes boiled in honey to keep them edible. Storage relied on cool, dry spaces, often cellars or underground pits. Food for winter was prepared in the summer and fall, requiring careful planning and labor. A typical day for a peasant might include two main meals, a midday meal and an evening supper. Breakfast was rare, and sometimes frowned upon as gluttony. The midday meal would include bread, pottage, and possibly a piece of cheese. Supper, lighter in content, might repeat the same components. Nobles observed more structured meals. Dinner, served mid-morning, was the main meal. Supper in the evening was smaller but could still include meat and wine. Meals were eaten from shared dishes. Spoons were common, but knives were personal items brought to the table. Forks did not become widespread in Europe until the 16th century. Feasts marked religious and seasonal events. During Christmas, Easter, weddings, or royal visits, meals expanded to include many dishes. A single feast could include several courses, each with multiple items. Roast meats, pies, sauces, wine, sweetmeats, and performances made the feast a political and social tool. Richly decorated foods, like peacocks served with their feathers or pies that opened to reveal live birds, were common in noble courts. Even monasteries held large communal meals on feast days, but the content always followed church rules: no meat on fast days, simple dishes during Advent and Lent. Despite their limited options, medieval peasants often had better cardiovascular health than modern people. Their diets were high in fiber and low in sugar. They worked physically demanding jobs, which balanced their caloric intake. Malnutrition did occur, especially during famine years, failed harvests, or wars. The poor were more vulnerable to food shortages, while nobles suffered from excess, gout, dental decay, and digestive disorders. Diseases like scurvy appeared when fresh produce was unavailable. But overall, the diet of the working class was nutritionally dense, if repetitive. The medieval diet was not a single thing. It was a spectrum, shaped by class, geography, season, and faith. Peasants ate to survive, nobles ate to demonstrate power, the church regulated what could be eaten and when, and through all of this, food remains central to life. Understanding the medieval diet is about more than recipes. It's about how people lived, worked, celebrated, and endured. Bread, beans, and pottage may seem humble, but they sustained a civilization. For more serious explorations of real historical life, subscribe to this channel. If you want to see what a peasant's meal looked like, or how a noble's feast was prepared, stay tuned. History isn't just what happened, it's what people ate, how they lived, and how they survived.